Today we're going to look at the 2018 free response exam. We're going to do question 4, ArrayTester. First of all, I want everybody to go to my course website. I've put a link in the description, and you're going to get 2 files. So you're going to get this CSA 2018 PDF that's got the question in it. And you're going to go all the way over here, and you're going to pick up question 4, tester.zip. So that's got the BlueJ project folder in it. All right, once you got those 2 files, let's go ahead and take a look at the question. So we're doing question 4. And this involves the use or making an array tester. So here we got a couple of methods that I have to write. So the first one is this get column. So you're going to go across this array, 2-dimensional array they have, and you're just going to extract a single column from that array, indicated by the parameter C. And then there's a couple of methods here that they provide for you. So has all values is given to you, and then contains duplicates is given to you. But then at the bottom, they have another method called isLatin. So when we take in a 2-dimensional array, you have to go through and just determine if it's a Latin square or not. And they have some rules regarding that. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead and write the first method, part A, get column. So it's pretty straightforward. Once you're given a 2-dimensional array, they're going to specify a column number. So maybe column 0 or column 1 or column 2. And then you have to go ahead and extract that column and then place it into a 1-dimensional array. So here, for example, they ask you to extract column 1. So it's this one, the middle, 1475. And obviously, if you extract that data, it's going to be a 1-dimensional array. So your output is this, 1475, in a 1-dimensional array. All right, so let's go ahead and write the code for this. So I've got my BlueJ project folder here, and I've opened up the ArrayTester file. So I've got it right here. All right, so let's go ahead and the first thing we need to do is we need to create a result array. So, obviously we want to extract a single column here. We want to put it into a 1-dimensional array. So what's going to be the size of that 1-dimensional array? Well, it seems to me it's just going to be the number of rows. So however many number of rows this 2-dimensional array has, that's going to be the size of my 1-dimensional result array. So let me go ahead and write that up. So int results and new int. So now I have to figure out the size. So how many rows are there in this 2-dimensional array? So you just use the dot length member. So if you just indicate dot length, that will tell you the number of rows in there. So just AR2D and then dot length. Okay, that gives me the number of rows. So once I have my results array set up, really all I have to do is loop across this 2-dimensional array and figure out where the column that we want to extract lies. So given this parameter C, we can do a conditional. So let me just start by looping across that 2-dimensional array. So let's do this for int row get 0, row less than AR2D dot length, row plus plus. Right, so that gets us across the rows, and then we need to get across the columns. So we simply do this for int call get 0, call less than AR2D 0 dot length. Okay, so that's the difference. You should have that memorized. So looping across the 2-dimensional array, it's something that you need to have memorized, and because this, that code shows up in every exam. All right, anyway, so now that I'm looping across my 2-dimensional array, obviously I don't want to get every single element. I just want to pull out elements that happen to be in column C. So let me just put a conditional here. Just say, all right, well, if call, is C, then that tells me it's probably an element that I want to pull out and put into my result array. So I can just say, all right, well, results, and so it's probably going to go row by row. So, the first element we get, row 0, the other element is going to be at row 1, and then after that is row 2. So I indicate row, And then we pull out the particular element, so ArrayTD, the element is going to be at row call. Okay, so that should go ahead and put all that data inside my results array. So the last step is, notice here that this method does return an item of type int, so one-dimensional array. So I've got to return that result, so just say return result. Okay, so let's compile and run, and then see if we get the right answer. So if I've done this correctly, I should see 1475. Yeah, so I get a 1475. Let me just compare it to the question. And yeah, so in this case, I did provide that same array. So this ArrayTD, I put the same data in there, and then, if we extract column 1, we get 1475, and that's what I see on the output. Okay, so next step is this. Let me go ahead and write the code for part B. So part B is much further down. So part B is down here. Okay, so this is Latin. So let me just go ahead and refer to the question and this one. So given a two-dimensional array, we have to determine if it's a Latin square or not. And the way we do this is we have to go through each of these conditions. So, the first row has no duplicate values. So they actually give us two helper methods. And I believe that contains duplicates will help us there. Okay, and then the other two conditions, you have to say all values in the first row of the square appear in each row of the square. So, all these values are going to be in the other rows, and then all values in the first row of the square appear in each column of the square. Okay, so all we need to do is go through the two-dimensional array and, make sure that all these three conditions hold, and then we can, confidently say that it's a Latin square. If any of these come out false, the whole thing falls apart, and it's, the whole thing is false. So let's go ahead and solve it. Okay, so let's go back to my code, and first of all, let me make a result. So Boolean result, and I'll set it to true. So I'll assume that, for the most part, it's true, and then, if any of those conditions come out false, then the whole thing falls apart, and the whole thing's false. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is determine if there's duplicates. So let me go ahead and do this. So the first row has to, we consider the first row, and then we say, okay, are there duplicates in that first row? So actually, let me pull out the first row from that two-dimensional array, which we call square. So let me say int first row, and then to pull that out, we just do square 0. So that will get me first row. Okay. So let's go ahead and just, recognize that conditional. So if contains duplicates, right? So I give it first row. If that's the case, it's not a Latin square. So let me just go back. Okay, so if it has duplicates, then it's not a Latin square, right? It'll have to be unique. So if that's the case, not a Latin square. So result, immediately say, just result gets false. Okay, next step is the other condition where I have to look at that first row. All values in the first row appear in each row of the square. So it looks to me like I'm going to have to go through, maybe loop through every single row and make sure that every value in the first row shows up somewhere in each row of the square. So let me go ahead and write that code. So we have this. I'm going to loop through the, each row in turn. Obviously, I'm not going to start with row 0 of square. I'm going to have to start with row 1. However, I think they do give us a helper method, and they have this method called has all values, and I give it, an array here, array run array 2 method has all values returns true if and only if every value in array 1 appears in array 2. This is going to help a lot. So I can give it my first row and then just extract each subsequent row of the square, and then, this should return true in all those cases. If it doesn't, then I know I don't have a Latin square. So this is going to help a lot, has all values. Okay, so let me go ahead and loop. So for int row, okay, I'm not going to start row 0 because row 0 is the first row, and that's the one we're going to have to consider. So I start row 1, row less than square dot length. So that's the number of rows you have in there, row plus plus. Okay, so now I use that has all values, and I have to say, all right, well, I give it the first row, compare it to the current row, and if it's true, we're fine. But if it comes out false, the whole thing just falls apart, and the whole thing is false. We don't have a Latin square. So let me make a conditional here and say, all right, well, has all values, and I give it first row, and I compare it with the current row, the one we're under consideration, which is square, and then I give it row. Okay, so to make things clear, I can say, all right, if we happen to get a false, then this whole thing falls apart. I don't have a Latin square, so I can just say results, it's false. Okay, I think that's gonna work. So then we have the last condition, which is this. We have this condition whereby all values in the first row of the square appear in each column of the square. Okay, so it seems to me we're going to have to do something similar. Do I have a helper value? Yeah, I recall I did the get column. So I can pull out a column, and then I can use it within has all values. So I can pull out a column and then compare it to make sure everything from the first row appears in every column. Okay, we'll go ahead and write that. So it's going to be quite similar. So we have to look at every column, right? So for int call get 0, call less than square 0 dot length. So that's the number of columns we have inside that two-dimensional array. Call plus plus. Okay, so what's the first thing we need to do? We need to pull out a column, right? So let me go ahead and do that. And it's going to be just, using the get column method. So I give it square and, start at 0, then 1, then 2. So just give it this call variable. Okay, next step is I do something very similar here with the has all values. However, I need to use this column array that I just pulled out. So if, and then has all values, and then I give it column, and then I compare it to this, not square, I compare it to column. Because I just pulled, first row compared to column. We just pulled out. Okay, much better. So if that is equal to false, then we have the same kind of situation here where I just set result to false. And then that's pretty much it. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is we need to return whatever result we got. So let me just go down here and say return result. And then that's pretty much it. Okay, so I've got a test bench set up. So let's go ahead and see if this works. And just, recalling from the question, I believe the first 2 were Latin squares and the last 3 were not. So let me go back to the question here and double check. And I see that, yeah, the first 2, did happen to be Latin squares. These 2 were Latin squares. And then these 3, these other ones were not Latin squares. So this seems to work. Okay, however, I do have one last thing is the JUnit test bench. So let me go ahead and run the tests. And I get 10 green check. So that tells me my code is correct. Okay, so that concludes this particular question. So question for ArrayTester is complete. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.